Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, 5 Strategies for Engaging Millennials That Don't Involve Office Perks. My name is Stephanie Goebel, one of the Directors of Marketing here at Saba, and before I introduce our featured speakers, I'd like to just remind you all to feel free to ask questions and send feedback throughout the session. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce our speakers today. We have with us Patrick Cournoyer. Patrick was the Vice President of Training and People at Flightcar, where he was directly responsible for all corporate training initiatives and organizational effectiveness for the team. Additionally, he led the recruitment, teammate development, and internal culture strategy for the organization. Patrick was also a member of the founding launch team at Virgin America and played an integral role in developing the values, brand, and experience that the company is known for. We also have with us Sherry Cruz. Sherry is a learning and development professional with experience working with all levels in the organization to create high-quality, efficient training solutions that align company goals with departmental individual requirements and desires. Sherry is passionate about creating effective training programs that offer an engaging and enjoyable work environment while supporting the strategic needs of the organization. And with those introductions, I'm going to pass things over to Patrick to get us started.
Very good. Thank you, Stephanie, and welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure for us to be here. And I thought we could start out with a quick intro to Flightcar. I think it's pretty relevant as we talk today about engaging millennials. I think it's pretty relevant to tell you a little bit about that organization and the fact that 95% of our workforce were millennials. So over the past 3 years, we've had a lot of ability and opportunity to engage millennials directly. And also, we were a partner with Saba. We've been partnered with Saba since January of 2015. Saba provided our learning management system and our learning platform for our entire organization. So it's a great product and was a real game changer for our company. We grew from 3 locations to our height, which was 17 locations with the help of Saba. So we have a pretty cool client spotlight video, I think, on the Saba website. So there should be some information about how to access that, and you can see a little bit more about what we did at Flightcar and specifically how we utilized the learning management system platform. So that's how we're here today. Sherry and I worked together at Flightcar for the past 18 months. And Sherry, as you know, was the learning and development manager on my team. We together developed the entire strategy of learning at the organization. But beyond that, we also worked very closely on the strategy to engage millennials because our workforce, as I said, was made up primarily of millennials. So a great way to do that is through the learning and development function, which we'll talk a little bit later on in the the presentation. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. And I thought we could start out with an interesting poll and find out from you what percentage of your organization is made up of millennials. So there should be an option on your screen to be able to take the poll and let us know what the numbers are. So I'll give you guys just a couple of seconds to take the poll. Good, looks like the numbers are coming in, which is excellent. All right, I see. This is great. It's all live data. So it looks like the high majority of you are in the lower percentages. It looks like about 55% are 10 to 20%. We've got 21% that are below 50. So give it just a couple more seconds to poll. Good. All right, so I think we can see with these numbers as they keep coming in, and we'll reference back to this in just a minute. But, you know, one of the things that is pretty indicative of these numbers is that it looks like about half of you have up to 50% of your organization made up of millennials, and that's a pretty standard number right now across multiple industries. And I think I know we'll see that those numbers obviously are going to grow. over the next 2 to 5 years with different work groups either retiring or a lot of millennials coming out into the workforce. So I think what we're going to see is that many organizations are going to have a much higher percent of millennials. And for those that have 70 to 90% and then 90% plus, I think that a lot of the information in here is really going to resonate maybe with stuff that you're doing today. And for those of you who don't have a heavy millennial population, hopefully you can take some of these away and not only use these to engage your millennials, but also it's a great way just to engage your organization and perhaps a different perspective on how to engage your organization. So, okay, so let's move on. We're going to jump into the presentation. And I thought that another good way to start is to talk a little bit about the millennial, right? And these concepts that are out there about millennials, right? So millennials, again, are people in the work group between ages of 18, 19 years old up until the early to mid 30s. It depends on where you look at the gauge or the scale with this. But basically, if you look at a millennial between the ages of 19 and let's say 32 or 33, that's pretty much the demographic that we're talking about when it comes to millennials. And there is this perception with millennials that they kind of fall into 3 categories, right? So, or that they have 3 traits maybe that millennials have. One could be that they are immature, right? Because they tend to be obviously younger, right? And there's this concept because of the age that they're automatically immature, that they don't have a lot of experience in the business field, that they may be naive, and also that they can be easily distracted from content, right? So there's that perception out there. The second perception that we have sometimes is that they're extremely technology dependent, right? We see millennials always on their smartphones or tablets, always connected to some sort of a social media outlet or some sort of a technology component of their life. Like if a millennial lost their phone or lost their tablet device, then they would be lost, right? And it's because they're so technology dependent or they have so much tie to technology. And the third is that there's this idea of impatience, right? So never satisfied with the right now, always looking to the next thing. And always kind of moving forward. Their attention span is very limited to maybe, let's say, an immediate project, or that sometimes multitasking is a challenge. So in my mind, I think that in our mind, that there's a lot of misconceptions. Those 3 things are very much misconceptions because I think those 3 things, if we flip them and we look at them from a different perspective, are actually benefits of the millennial generation. And the first is that they really are highly socially engaged. And I think in turn, they're very knowledgeable about their impact on society and also their impact socially because of especially their ties to social media. I think that can be a super positive influence to an organization because social media is a great and very effective and immediate form of marketing and communication. So I think that's actually a great thing and a great thing to harness as an organization and to embrace as opposed to thinking that is a challenging point. The second thing, I think that because of the social interaction with millennials, they're very connected to technology, and that means they're extremely team-oriented as well. They are inherently connected to a large social group, and they're very comfortable interacting in large social groups, and in turn are very comfortable interacting in a large work group as well. So I think that that's a positive. And then this impatience or drive and ambition, I also think that some people see that as negative, but we really have found that to be fuel for ambition and growth. The millennial generation is very driven to growing in an organization that they feel connected with. So instead of looking at it as a negative, if you manage the millennial generation correctly, then that can develop into career progression, right? Your future leaders of your organization, they thrive in fast-paced advancement of organizations. So if you find skills and abilities in a group or in a specific millennial, and you can develop that person could become very quickly the next leader at your organization. So just a couple of things to think about as we move along in the presentation that, what you may have as misconceptions or other people in your industry may have as misconceptions, we actually suggest to look at them as positives and to utilize that as steps and something as being supportive in your organization. So Sherry, what are your thoughts on, I've been talking for a couple of minutes, so what are your thoughts on these misconceptions or the realities of the millennial generation?
Yeah, so I'm actually really excited to be able to speak here today because I fall on the older curve of that millennial generation. So I actually get to speak from the perspective of being a millennial and really understanding these traits and these cultural norms here. And thanks to working on Patrick's team, I can truly testify firsthand to the benefits of having a senior leader who not only acknowledges that these traits can be positive, but actually creates policies based on celebrating them and encouraging them even. So I'll get to provide some insight on my experience as a millennial, both in that role and in a leadership and training role, because I actually got to put myself in the shoes of these employees as we implemented programs to really ensure that they were engaged. It was my job to create and manage effective training programs for our organization, which, as Patrick mentioned, consisted of mostly millennials. So I'm really excited to move forward as we go here, and Patrick's going to tell us a little bit about how we can use some of these to turn them into motivational drivers for millennials.
Exactly. And, Sherry, like I said, 95% of our company, Sherry was one of the millennials, and I really love the fact that she can, and I really relied on her the entire time that we worked together to say, what do you think? You are a millennial, so what do you think about the fact that what should we do? Like, how will the millennials receive this? Will they be receptive to it? And one other important thing that I did not mention earlier, which I think is really fascinating for you all to know, is our CEO of our company is a millennial. He's actually 21 years old. So, and when I started with the organization, he was 19 years old. So if, if we're to do a poll and say, how many of you have 21-year-old CEOs, I would probably think that would be an extremely low number. So we really are, I think we're very connected with the millennial generation because completely from the top down, we had a millennial workforce. So, interesting part for you to know about our CEO at Flightcar. Okay, so let's move on, and we're going to talk a little bit about our different strategies. We are going to talk about what really drives millennials, and I'm just going to talk quickly on this slide because there's some really great content coming up, and we're going to show you some of the training programs that we developed. We're going to take you on a little tour of our learning and development programs so that you can get a first-hand look at it. But I think, kind of 4 areas we want you to keep in mind of driving millennials as we talk about the 5 strategies that we used, not only at Flightcar, but different organizations that we've worked for. So the first is that we have this feedback, this idea of feedback, and it's very critical that feedback flow in both directions. Both formal and informal opportunities for feedback really work with millennials. So we'll talk about, if you have a performance management process, which I'm sure you all do, but formalized feedback is great and very much needed, but also very informal feedback and social feedback to a millennial in front of their peers or work group is super recharging or charging for the millennial group. They really love to hear feedback, and they also love to provide feedback. So we'll talk a little bit later on ways that you can provide opportunities to elicit feedback from your work group. Anonymous feedback as well. We'll talk a little bit later on about anonymous feedback, but anonymous feedback it's scary for some organizations, but what we have found is millennials love to provide anonymous feedback. And if you are able to control the atmosphere of that anonymous feedback and that you action anonymous feedback, it can be a huge asset to your organization to allow that in the feedback process. The second area is speaking up. Millennials love to celebrate or have their ideas celebrated, and they have really unique thoughts and ideas, and they love to speak up and provide their thoughts and ideas and see that their thoughts and ideas are propelling the organization forward. So don't be afraid to allow and give the opportunity for your millennials to speak up on a regular basis. One of the ways, just quickly, as we did that at Flightcar, is we had an all-hands meeting every week that was led by the CEO and myself, and the CEO allowed every week for anonymous questions to be answered. And we committed to the organization that we would answer any question that came in. Now, again, that is considered probably very edgy for a lot of organizations, but what that allowed us to do is we absolutely got a ton of really good questions and feedback because we committed that we would answer these questions. So something that worked really well for us may not work for your organization, or maybe some elements of it would work for your organization, but really consider it because I think that we got a really good feedback from these anonymous sessions. Millennials really like to be key players. They have to know that they're part of something bigger. So no matter what level they're at in the organization, they have to know that what they're doing every day is making a difference in the organization. And the way how we found to make that work was to show the millennial how what they did every day and the decisions that they made every day propelled the organization forward, and that they were a critical part to the success. And also, just lastly, constant engagement. They have to feel like they matter. Millennials really need to feel that they are part of a team, that they are part of the future of the company, that they have a very clear path, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. So Sherry, what are your thoughts on these?
So I think accepting these drivers and what drives millennials and how to keep them engaged is really going to determine whether or not they even stay with your company, or whether they're going to seek out one of the other options that are constantly being thrown their way with social networking and job resource sites. Millennials are highly driven, as Patrick mentioned, and we want to be constantly moving up and confident that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. So consider the amount of resources that companies dedicate to sourcing, recruiting, interviewing, processing, training new employees, and how much the average millennial sees this on a daily basis. It's beckoning them to apply, give it a shot, experience this new venture, and give them grand illusions of a promising future. So I think we're all familiar with how much revenue companies can lose when there are issues with retention. You got to rehire, retrain, all that. So consider your company. Are you dedicating the same amount of resources, time, and energy to that goal of retaining those millennials? And is it enough to really compete with those other companies that are making that effort to snag up that new talent in your millennials? So I think ultimately that's what we're really here for today, is to figure out how to get ahead of that game and to keep those millennials really engaged and working for you.
Absolutely. So that's a good point, Sherry, is that there's, especially in the millennial world, there's always somebody else looking to recruit them and to hire them. So I'm sure you all, just like we, want to retain our talent, and hopefully these strategies will help you do that. Okay, so let's move on to the actual strategies. Like we said, we have 5 strategies that we're going to talk about. And the first one is really about providing meaningful work and a clear purpose. So we talked about, what drives the millennials a minute ago about being a key player, right? And the meaningful role and clear purpose really energizes this millennial population. Knowing that their contributions affect the larger strategy as a whole, this invigorates this work group. Knowing that they're part of a larger team, and as a senior leadership team, we really need to encourage our frontline managers and leaders to always find ways of allowing the millennial to be a key player in their part of the organization. At Flightcar, we had 12 different locations located throughout the United States, right? So very distant workforce, and the way how they got connected to the kind of mothership or the headquarters was through their local leadership. So we, as senior leadership, empowered the managers, their frontline managers, to really work on creating clear purpose, and we gave them resource materials and developed programs to help create that clear purpose. But I think it's very important that you have a very clear purpose for your millennials, that they see what the future is, and that they have a very clear growth path. So Sherry, let's talk a little bit about this next or this first area, which is they need to make a difference, right? So tell us a little bit about what you think about how we allow millennials to feel that they made a difference.
So I think it's important and easy to provide this purpose at the organizational level. Really, we publish it in company values and your job descriptions and so on. But in reality, we're a culture of immediate and constant reminders, and this cannot be an exception to that. So the knowledge of how important they are and what difference they're going to make, it really has to be part of their daily grind. So it means making the effort, even in those small endeavors, to go beyond saying, do it because it's your job. You have to tell them, do it because it's going to matter. It doesn't have to matter directly to them. We're not saying that millennials are selfish. It's actually quite the opposite, because if you tell your millennial workforce that making a change or employing a new rule is going to make a difference to the company or the customers or even their fellow teammates, they're going to care about it. They're going to want to hear it. They're going to want to learn it. And when they're learning it, their attention's going to go up, their retention's going to go up, because when they're learning it, they're already going to be thinking those few steps ahead about how they're going to engage the material in real life and how they're ultimately going to make a difference. So it might take some extra time and focus to come up with that what's in it for me statement and figure out how to convey it and remind your employees of it throughout those events. But truly with that end goal in sight and that bigger picture in mind, you're really going to keep their focus for what they need to know now. So we're going to show you a sample of how we applied this in our flight car e-learning a little bit later on in the discussion during our walkthrough.
Very good. All right. So the second step in this is don't be afraid of distance players. And this is something I'm extremely passionate about because Sherry is a great example of being a distance player. So what I mean by distance player is doing a startup, and we were based out of San Francisco. So doing a startup in San Francisco, there's a lot of talent in San Francisco, but there's so much talent that's outside of our geographical area. And so I made the decision early on to look outside the basic Bay Area and to look beyond and say, I'm okay with having somebody who's a distance player on my team. What I mean is, Sherry, the whole time that Sherry and I worked together, we spent in the office a total in a year in the office scheduled about 12 days a year. So Sherry lives in Hawaii and our office was in San Francisco. So she was a complete distance player and was a huge connected and engaged member of our team. And I think it's all in how you manage your workforce and your distance workforce. Millennials can thrive in a distance relationship. It provides them a lot of opportunity for work-life balance. So Sherry, I think it would be great for your perspective on this because, like I said, we had a very distant player relationship and I think a very successful relationship. So tell us a little bit about what you thought of being a distance player and how you still remained connected to the organization.
Yeah, Patrick, I think you really hit the nail on the head there. You said that there was a focus for millennials to have a work-life balance. That's really important for this generation. So millennials want to know that we're more than our job. We're still ambitious. We're still driven. We still have that innate push to be successful and to work hard. But I think hiring more remote workers and giving them that ability to have that balance can really make a positive difference in your organization if you let it. So not only broadening your search for talent, but you actually might find that the resource you locate works more efficiently because of that unique role and that degree of freedom that you give them. But to succeed in it, I think you really can't be intimidated by the lack of control due to that freedom. So a lack of direct supervision doesn't mean lack of work production. So I've worked remotely for several years now, with Patrick for a couple of those, and truly I've felt even more engaged and dedicated to the work as I work remotely. Why? Truly because I've appreciated that freedom so much that it increased my sense of personal responsibility to turn over a professional, polished product on everything I did. And I felt like I had a moral obligation to reciprocate that trust by offering my complete dedication and hours to the work. But that only worked because I had a boss, Patrick, who could take a step back and manage by the project, not the hour, who could give me the responsibility, who could give me that trust that I could manage it. And you know what? The more he did, the more I could. So that freedom, that trust, and that ability to balance home life and work life, from my perspective, made me so thankful for my position and dedicated to my role that I was absolutely the most productive employee I could have been for them.
I 100% agree with that. So, from the fact that you were extremely productive and to your point, just because you weren't sitting at the desk across from me, we scheduled regular, we met twice a week, and we talked every day, right? So, I think because you don't have sometimes the distractions of the office environment, it can allow you to be much more productive. So that's great. And I echo everything that Sherry said. Thank you for the positive comments, and we have an excellent working relationship, and I think it is based on trust, and it's based on making sure that we can just trust the process of having a distance player. So to kind of wrap up this thought is, don't be afraid of distance players. Don't be afraid of having a team outside of the work area or your immediate office, because sometimes they can be even more productive by being a distance player. Okay, so let's move on to the next thought in this strategy, and it's about providing team engagement. So we at FlightCar provided a lot of team engagement opportunities. So you can do this in a lot of different functions. We used sports leagues. San Francisco has a lot of corporate sports leagues. I'm sure your towns or where you're located also have sports leagues. We had a 95% participation level from the millennial generation when it came to sports leagues. It was a social event outside of work. It was in the evenings. We had different types of sports that people played. So to have any aspect of your organization that has a 95% participation rate and something outside of work hours is pretty astounding. So find something that your millennials connect with. Sports is a great thing, and it's a great way to get them engaged. And also, as senior leaders, we went to these events. So I went to every, we played one sport I played, and it allowed me to build a strong social relationship with my team, and also allowed avenues for feedback, which was great. Community service, that was big for us in San Francisco. I'm sure you all have community service as well. We found that to be very popular with the millennial generation. Finding similar likes and celebrating them, allow millennials to build teams on their own, because that allows them to kind of say what they're interested in, whether it be photography or art, and then start maybe their own little teams and their own little social cultures based around that. And they like to kind of show that off to the organization. And also just social connection, depending on where you're at and what your company is like. But we had organizational dinners where once a month we had the entire team. We hosted a dinner at our headquarters, and our entire team was invited. Our locations out in the field that were not at our headquarters locations had weekly lunches where our team would come together and sit down and just be social with each other and find out a little bit more about each other. So find ways to engage your team outside of work, because the social connection with millennials goes miles with them. So, and Sherry, I know you were a distance player, so you didn't get to be in as many of the social events probably as you would like, but what was your experience with the social aspects that we provided?
Yeah, I think there's definitely special considerations to engage your remote employees. And it's important that you keep them engaged too. And Patrick, you mentioned we had a regular contact. I got to come see you every quarter, so got to feel a little bit of that social connection. And what I appreciated is when I visited headquarters, they would schedule those dinners and that around the times when I could be there for the visit. So that really made me feel connected to the individuals there and really like part of the team. So if you have the ability to flex some of those social events based on the ability to include some of those remote staff, I really think it's beneficial to increase their engagement and those ties to the organization. I think I see a question here that came up that says, how do you feel about distance players that are managers? Can they be remote as well? I think absolutely so, as long as you keep all of those ties in mind, keep this team engagement in mind, and that regular mentorship and that regular contact. I think truly engaging these 5 strategies can work from a distance manager's perspective as well. Also, a side note, as a flight car, as a training leader, I focused on this social engagement by incorporating social engagement into our training. So we actually set up social groups within SABA for each of our 13 locations, so our employees could jump on there, post events, share resources, ideas, discussions. It's really great. It gives you the ability to add these social features to your training so that the employees feel more engaged with the material, more engaged with each other. Really, we use it like the company's own private social media site. So you can do that. Your employees are already comfortable using social media. They're already doing it. So you take that environment and put it in your own organization's framework, and those millennials are engaged.
That's great. And, there's one other question in here that I think is kind of talking to this, and it's a good question because it's this concept of what have you found about millennials in the U.S. versus the rest of the world, and that's a great question because, we're talking specifically about the U.S. because we're a U.S.-based company, but we have looked at other millennial groups, through Europe and Australia and Asia, and at the end of the day, there is still a lot of, the millennial work group has a lot of common threads throughout the world, right? So the technology platform and the social media engagement. So we find that is pretty consistent across the board. And also because of this immediate need or the immediate availability, I think, of data and information that the millennial age has right now, I think the common concepts would remain the same across the board, because anybody in the world, like for example Facebook, right? I mean, that's one of the biggest social media connections, the biggest social media connection, right, in the world. So, and Facebook is around the world. So I think, and you can get immediate satisfaction, right, from social engagement. So I think that the inherent qualities are there across the world. Obviously, it may change regionally, but I think that because of the technology dependence and because of, in particular, the social media engagement, I think that you would pretty much find this everywhere. Great. Okay. So after each of the strategies, I'm just going to quickly tell you more of a high-level organizational effect from a senior leadership perspective and how these strategies affect the organization. Okay. So this strategy in particular about providing meaningful work and a clear purpose, it really does encourage a core culture based on teams and social interaction. And I think that social interaction in the workplace is just going to grow and grow. And I think that the social interaction really helps strengthen whatever your corporate culture is, because the more people are talking, the more people are engaging, the more that whatever your culture is and whatever your values are at the organization are going to grow. So I think that's a more global organization benefit of this strategy. The second is that it also allows you to really identify your bench strength and be able to move your organization's future leaders forward. So we all have the challenge of developing the best leaders for the future, right? And if you're in a growing organization, one of the biggest challenges that you probably have as HR professionals, for those HR professionals on the line, is how do you get the best talent? But what we say is identify your talent in your millennial generation and harness it and develop it, because that is, if you can grow from within, we all love to grow from within, right? Those are some of our best future leaders of the company are probably sitting in your millennial generation right now. So increase your bench strength using these strategies. Okay, so let's move on to strategy 2. And strategy 2 is all about mobile access. So mobile access, as we know, is we're talking about technology dependent, and this demographic is highly mobile, right? Very engaged with smartphones and tablets. And a lot of times in the past, I think about 15 years ago, and we thought that kind of mobile phones were a distraction. We wouldn't allow for our teammates to have mobile phones on the work floor, right? That we found you can't be texting or you can't have your mobile distraction on while you're part of your uniform or whatever it may be. Well, that trend is trend is changing, because nowadays we found that we have to utilize the technology, right? So utilizing the fact that we know that they're connected to smartphones, we're all connected to smartphones, and Sherry's going to talk about that in a minute. But instead of kind of working against smartphones or tablets, we should figure out ways to incorporate that into our organization. Flightcar in particular was able to incorporate all of our operational practices on a tablet. So Sherry, tell us a little bit about, the group, about how we really used mobility and how we encourage the use of smartphones and tablets, not only from an operational perspective, but from a training and development perspective as well.
Absolutely. So operationally, we use those iPads for all of the customer interaction from all of our Flightcar employees, which was so nice because it's millennials. We love our mobile devices. We've grown up with using them as the norm. So we were able to really use that comfort with the technology and put our software on it, and it was intuitive for the employees. So they jumped on, they learned the company's specific software, and they could use it from the get-go. There was minimal training required for a different device. And when there was downtime on the front line, we were able to use that exact same iPad that was used for customer interaction for training. So we designed the training in a way that it could be taken on a computer or on that iPad. That does require specific technical skills and certain design considerations to make that deliverable on either platform. So you need to consider things like the font size on your screen has to be big enough to read on a tablet. You can't just inundate your learners with screens packed with text. Your interactions has to be technically compatible with mobile device or computer, and navigation. You know, you can't really have these bulky, ever-present menus and instructions that are taking up that valuable screen real estate. You have to keep it really simplistic and designed to be released on either platform. But when you design it and you develop it with that ability for flexibility in mind, I'm telling you, you've unlocked a great opportunity for your employees, because at Flightcar, these employees didn't have to lock themselves in an office or a learning lab to complete the training. Managers didn't have to schedule that overlap of time to make sure that they were able to escape for that training. Instead, they used that downtime, they hopped on the mobile device they're already using, and they completed their training right then and there. So we also made it easy for them to use their own devices, so they could look at the training at home if they wanted to by using their own smartphone or tablet, which is really beneficial, and Patrick's going to speak to that a little bit now.
Yeah, so, you know, it's a good point about letting them use their own device. If your company has some sort of a policy, I'm sure that most companies struggle with this as far as allowing people to use their own smartphone or tablet for company use. But if there is a way that you can get that to work, that's worked really well for us, because it saves the company money. You know, that's one of the big benefits, I think, or effects of this strategy is if you can find a way to allow your millennials or your workforce to use their own technology, then they're going to be much more prone to use their technology, right? To use whatever type of platform, learning or development or communication platforms through their own technology. I remember about 8 or 9 years ago where I was issued a company iPhone, and I had an iPhone, right? And so I had to carry 2 iPhones with me, and that was very cumbersome, right? So eventually my previous company went to a policy of, look, you can use your own, you can expense a certain amount, right, for your own iPhone. And that was great, because then I could use the platform, I could use all the platforms, but I didn't have to carry 2 devices. So if there's a way that you can do that, then using personal devices can also save your company a ton of money. And also, it's just easy adoption to the technology that they already have. All right, so let's move on to strategy 3. And strategy 3 is all about fostering a culture of feedback. So I talked about this earlier in the program, and feedback being a two-way street, and the importance of not only providing feedback to your millennial workforce, but also to opening yourself up to as much feedback as possible. So, positive feedback with the millennial generation is absolutely contagious. They love to hear that they do a great job. They love to hear that what they did every day is making a difference for the organization, as I talked about. So find ways to daily give positive feedback to your millennials, because it goes a really long way. And positive feedback can be something as simple as, before you leave the office, just saying, thank you for your hard work today. Thanks for what you did today. A sincere thank you goes miles with millennials. And they start to they start seeing cadence with it, that engagement level goes up. So don't be afraid to give a lot of positive feedback. And the flip side of that is also be aware of constructive feedback, because what millennials hear with constructive feedback a lot of times is negative. So a way that you can turn that around is provide growth opportunities for your millennials, because when they hear growth, they connect with that. When they hear constructive feedback, that sometimes a wall goes up, right? And they hear negative tied with constructive. We've seen that. And so one of the ways that we got around that and still provided constructive feedback, but in a positive way, was presenting it from an opportunity or from a perspective of that this is a growth potential for you. Like, we know you want to grow and move forward. These are some steps and some additional things that you can do to help you with that. So, Sherry, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Patrick, I just want to speak to that point you said as you pass your employees and give them that small positive feedback on a daily basis. Just from a remote worker perspective, we don't get to see your peers on a daily basis, and they don't get to see your daily accomplishments. So it's really huge that we lose that small but impactful daily contact. So recognizing your remote workers, celebrating their big accomplishments publicly at a meeting or in front of their peer group, that really goes a lot farther and helps us to feel engaged and part of the success of the collective team.
And, the next kind of area is, like we talked about, is providing a two-way street. Like, so Sherry said, as far as being a remote workforce too, you want to provide the opportunity for the remote workforce to provide feedback to you, right? So it's not only just one way. So provide as many opportunities for millennials as possible. So figure out maybe a platform, pulse surveys or engagement surveys are an excellent way of allowing teammates to provide feedback. So, definitely look I'm sure most companies have an engagement platform, but definitely figure out a really unique way of getting data, especially through the engagement platform. Daily check-ins are great. Millennials love, for even just a couple of minutes, to connect with their leader. Social events. I talked about social events all the time. And as many social events as you can provide, that is a kind of unstructured way of providing opportunities for feedback and also learning feedback. So Sherry, if you just want to talk quickly about how we provide feedback during the learning process and how we gather some insight from the learners on what they thought of the learning process.
Yeah, so as recognize the importance of knowing how much millennials love and need to be heard to know that they're making a change, we really took that into consideration at Flightcar and made sure that we wrapped up any training exercise or company event with giving our employees a chance to give that feedback, and more importantly, making tangible and immediate changes based on that feedback as much as you can, whenever you can. I will tell you, Patrick was fantastic at this at Flightcar. So like you said, he collected feedback on the regular, and then he took the time to read and analyze that feedback, and then he publicized all the feedback, good, bad, everything in between, and then he made promises with, get this, deadlines based on that feedback. So to be honest with you, the first time I heard him speak to it, I thought it was a motivational tactic and he was blowing smoke. I really did. But I was blown away when he delivered on those promises and made those changes within the deadlines. And here he was, I'm thinking the VP of People and Training, a very busy guy, and he took the time to hear out everyone's feedback and make large-scale changes based on that. I understand that you can't make every idea turn into reality. It would be chaotic and expensive, to say the least. But that moment to see those changes made, that was a moment of epiphany for me, that I and that we all had the ability to make a difference. And I'll tell you what, in that moment, my loyalty to him and the company truly went through the roof. Also, to shift gears a little bit from a training development perspective, we had a manager at Flightcar that had a great idea for a new training program, lots of great content, just needed some kind of finesse from learning and development to polish it and make it a comprehensive package to roll out to our front line. So we did, and it actually then triggered a light bulb moment that if this guy had great insight, surely there's going to be others, and great ideas don't just come from senior leadership, right? So we implemented an official learning request form that we made accessible to all of our managers to collect information, asking for their voice, their ideas, what they needed, what they wanted, and empowering them to make the difference. And I'll tell you, it was so positively received. I had almost every manager contact me and thank me and tell me how excited they were about the opportunity to contribute ideas for what the employees needed based on what they saw firsthand. And it was the things that senior leadership isn't going to see when they walk through and everybody's on their best behavior, but they got to see the actual needs of what their employees were struggling with on a daily basis. So taking their feedback into consideration and giving them a voice was not just great for them and for their motivation, but for the company too, because it allowed us to see what they really needed.
That's great. And, and I think, Sherry, thank you for those comments, because I think another key aspect of this is that this was absolutely a top-down effort. Our CEO was very dedicated as well to making sure that we were actioning feedback. The biggest suggestion I can give you is, if you're going to ask for feedback, is that you really have to action it, because as soon as you don't action it, then the relevancy of the feedback and the millennials aren't going to stop providing it, because they're going to think, well, I'm giving feedback and nothing's happening. So you have to commit as an organization to action feedback. So if you do that, I promise that they will be engaged. From our experience, that was the case. So just quickly, the organizational effect of this third strategy of fostering this culture of feedback is, millennials have a lot of relevant and specific feedback. They have a very different perspective and outlook on the organization, and we love that. I mean, every organization should want a fresh perspective on how to do things and to challenge the status quo in the way how we do things. And the second is that they just feel more integral to the part of the company, which then also connects them more to the brand, more to your organization, more to the future and their growth. And again, that's all about retention. So, okay, so we're going to move on to 4, and 4 is about microlearning, and this is all Sherry's world. So I'm going to actually let Sherry talk about this one, but we have some different perspectives that we use. We're going to show you a quick snapshot of some of the training that we use. So Sherry, why don't we maybe take the next 5 minutes or so and kind of talk us through microlearning and what our strategy was at Flightcar with microlearning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Patrick. So remember, millennials have grown up with mobile technology. That constant engagement, those quick bursts of information, that's the norm for them. So knowing this, you got to cater to that desire for quick engagement and for interaction, considering what it takes for somebody to learn information, to really need to attend to it in order to apply it to short-term memory. They have to repeat it or think about it, or better yet, apply it to transfer it to long-term memory. And they've got to refresh it periodically to retain it properly. So considering those two factors, realize that this micro-learning is really ideal for our millennial workforce. And what micro-learning is basically just taking all of your training and turning it into short, digestible modules that are no longer than 10 minutes apiece. For your employees, this is fantastic. It's much more convenient to jump on and take an 8-minute training that walks them through a new policy. They're not inundated with swarms of information in an hour-long module that they're not going to remember half of anyway. They're just getting their important information. And they're not going to hesitate to jump back on and refresh themselves with the information because it only took 8 minutes of their time. But most importantly, they're going to head into this with a positive attitude. They're not dreading those hours of screen time. They're going to know it's just a few minutes and they're done. So if they head into it with a positive feeling, they're certainly going to be more likely to want to implement it when they're done. Benefits for the company is a fantastic part too. So instead of taking months to push out the new training, it can be done in days or weeks. Not kidding, I've seen us do it. So if you're packaging all of your training into large modules, then of course you have longer design and development times, but you also have to get through more levels of approval, maybe cross-departmentally, and those approvals are going to take longer because the training's longer. And I've been part of companies who've taken this approach, and it does work, but I've seen a 30 or 45-minute module take 3 to 4 months to get pushed out. That's 4 months where it took the information to get from corporate headquarters to getting implemented on the front lines. Whereas if you take a look at microlearning, that 10-minute module, take that 40 minutes of content, break it down into 4 to 5 modules, design and development goes quicker, review periods cut down because you shoot it out to the department involved with that specific content, and it takes a quarter of the time for them to review it because it's 10 minutes. So the updates are made, the modules are launched, and it goes from conception to implementation less than a month. So how do we make it effective? Because yes, there's going to be special considerations for how to create microlearning. So first, we've discussed under 10 minutes apiece. Next, you're going to make it interactive as much as possible. Voiceover, visual cues, videos, games, buttons. The reason's simple. The more the user has to interact with the screen, the more they're paying attention. And remember, they're not going to learn if they don't pay attention. If they're not learning, what's the point of the training? So it might cost a little more on the front end to develop that highly engaging training, but in the end, it's going to save you money because you're going to avoid the necessity to retrain and retest your employees who didn't learn it the first time around from the more basic delivery approaches. Next, we suggest that you throw out that dreaded final assessment. Patrick and I developed an alternative approach that still satisfies the ultimate goal of ensuring that your learners are paying attention and retaining the information, but rather than saving it for the end, we insert periodic learning checks after every 2 to 3 minutes of material. So if the learner fails any of the questions, they have to repeat those 2 to 3 minutes and try again until they pass the section and can move on. So it really ensures that they pay attention the entire time, and it doesn't overly frustrate them because when they have to repeat a section, it's only a couple of minutes. It just makes sure that they attend to the material. Finally, we need to provide positive feedback along the way through the interaction. Just encourage them when they are engaging in the interactions correctly or passing those learning checks correctly, as simple as great job or keep it up, or showing them a menu that shows them that they're progressing through those different sections and different modules. That's enough. They just need that little positive encouragement along the way. And finally, we suggest launching a new training module every 7 to 14 days. This is really, truly only possible with microlearning. You can't launch an hour-long module every week. Your employees certainly wouldn't want you to. But chances are there's some form of procedural change or standard to update each month or something to improve on operationally. So pushing your company to release something every couple of weeks really drives that initiative towards constant progress. At Flightcar, we released a 5-minute pulse check in addition to our regular training program. So monthly, we would reach out to our leadership teams, ask them to identify some operational shortcomings that they saw that month or that they heard from customer feedback surveys. And then we use that to create 5 to 8 quiz questions that all of our frontline teammates would have to take each month. Whenever they missed a question, they were provided a hint as to where to go back and get their original training information from or why they need to reconsider their answer. But it really gave a voice to our management employees by hearing their feedback and acting on it. And then it supported our operations team by releasing that training that was necessary by real-time customer feedback. So very briefly, just want to show you a quick demo of one of the modules that we released at Flightcar. This module was developed to be included as part of our onboarding training for Flightcar teammates. It was just the support staff information about the fundamental policies that affected our customers. Some background on the particular set of challenges that we faced in this set of modules is that at the time the company was in the middle of rebranding and relaunching. So whole new color scheme, whole new logo, internal verbiage, revamping the customer interface, everything. So we didn't have those supplemental images and videos to use, which means we had to be really creative with our presentation of the material and maximizing our interactivity to maintain our employees' attention. So as we open it, I'll let you know there is voiceover during these parts, but in order to avoid confusion between my voice now and my voice in the module, I'm just going to speak to the module as it plays. So as the module opens, we always opened with the importance of the application of the training. We're telling our employees how knowing and implementing those policies are really going to make a difference to our customers. And then as it opens, we elaborate specifically on how those policies played such an important role in the company to really drive that importance home. And right away, we require just minimal interaction to really get them engaged with the screen. All throughout, we've also provided a reminder with this little community connection piece. Anytime they want to click on this icon and open it up, they can read right here the reminder of how this particular module is going to make a difference to them and their teammates, their customers, the company as a whole. So we're always catering to that. Give them a reason, let them know they're making a difference. We can see here they're at the menu where the learner can see what's ahead and how much is ahead, so they kind of brace themselves for what they're about to embark on, and whenever possible, allow them to choose the order that they want to learn the material in, and let them repeat it unlimited number of times if they so choose. Also want to point out real quick how we made it mobile friendly, so there's minimal text on the screen. Everything's large and easy to read. And our navigation buttons are small and icon-driven as much as possible. We've made a menu collapsible, so it's not taking up that screen space. The navigation, you hover and you see it, so it's not taking up screen space. It's all designed to be very mobile-friendly, or take it on a computer like I'm doing right now. So if they choose a section, we, again, as we start that topic, drive home the importance of that topic through a voiceover, which you can't hear at the moment. But once they arrive to the first screen, they're, again, able to select the order in which they learn about these subtopics. So we maintain their attention by keeping that voiceover going, by keeping a little bit of movement or animation every few seconds, and requiring interaction on every screen. So here, again, is mobile-friendly by revealing that information through interaction and saving your screen space rather than putting all of that information on the screen at one time. And then once they move through these couple of minutes of reading interaction, they immediately have that simplified learning check. It can be a standard assessment question like multiple choice true false, or it can be scenario based. And if they have not paid attention, here we go, it's incorrect, they have to redo it again. So it just ensures that they're paying attention as they progress. Finally, we found that it's really most effective when they wrap up the whole module to follow it up with an observational assessment when appropriate. So allow your employees to really show off what they learned to their manager or supervisor, and it allows the manager to provide some mentorship and allows your millennials to show off and perform, which actually serves as a great motivator on how to apply the material. And Patrick, I'm going to let you speak to the organizational strategy of that.
Absolutely. And, I think something to keep in mind is that, Sava powered that learning presentation that you just saw. All of our training content is developed and deployed through the Sava learning management system. So, everything that Sherry was talking about from a design perspective is completely capable in Sava. So that's why one of the reasons why it was a game changer for us as an organization, and also why it's a very easy system to use from a front end perspective, and also from the back end or the administrator perspective as well. So just quickly, just a quick check on time. I know we have about 5 more minutes, so I'm just going to wrap up with strategy 4 really quick, and then we'll briefly talk about strategy 5. But some of the effects that strategy 4 has, it allows the organization to change directions very quickly. If you're deploying micro-learning every 7 to 14 days, it's easy to change direction with training and putting out new operational needs that may come up in that week or 2-week period. It allows us for learning agility for sure, and it can easily implement new products and services because employee training groups or employee groups are expecting regularly deployed training content. So every week, your employees will be actively, ready for a new training program, which is just a small bite-sized section. So really love micro-learning. Think about it. If you haven't done it in the past, take a look at it because it really worked for our organization. So just quickly on strategy 5, investing in the future growth by developing a clear plan. We've talked a little bit about this earlier and throughout. Millennials really need to feel that they have a very clear path and that they can grow in the organization. And the concept of a yearly review or sitting down with your manager once a year or even once a quarter, that just doesn't work. Maybe, getting promoted in 3 years to the next level, again, you'll lose your millennial within 18 months if they don't see steps in their development. Now, steps in development doesn't mean promotion to the next level. It just means that they feel that they have a clear purpose and that they're being developed in their role. So Sherry, if you just want to quickly talk about, something that we did at Flight Car, specifically around developing new millennial leaders and giving them the opportunity to grow on a regular basis.
Yep, we hired a lot of managers in development, and the intention was to hire these managers in development, train them over a period of 12 to 18 months, and then allow them to become station managers and run the new stations as the company expanded. Bear in mind, these were all millennials, most of which didn't have management experience in the past, so it really required special consideration of how to mold them and grow them into competent leaders in a short time. So what we did is broke the program into 4 phases and gave them a really clearly defined set of knowledge, skills, and abilities for each phase. And this really allowed them to feel like they were making progress as they advanced through each of the phases. At the end of the phase, then they would take a test, but an observational assessment-based test where their managers could provide them some direct mentorship and allow them to show off the skills that they learned at the end of each phase and really cater to that drive for millennials that love to perform and show off what they learned and what they can do, and really grow under that direct supervision of the role that they were ultimately training to become a part of.
Excellent. And ultimately creating that daily advancement potential for direct leadership interactivity, like Sherry just said, is critical with this because, again, that goes back to feedback. And also from a senior leadership perspective, senior leaders have to be involved in the development of the millennials because if they feel connected with different levels of the organization, they're going to feel that they have the opportunity to grow and they have the opportunity to see what the steps are beyond just what their next role is going to be. And building a relationship with senior leaders absolutely helps us with that. So just quickly, the organizational effectiveness of strategy 5, it allows us to identify skills and abilities early on, to harness those, to develop the future leaders of the organization, provides the ability to course correct on a regular basis because you're constantly engaging with the millennials and you're working towards mentoring and growing them in their role. And so because there's that constant interactivity, it allows us also to course correct as leaders and maybe change the way how we're leading this millennial group. At the end of the day, they really want to grow with the company. So let's provide that for them. Let's find every avenue to provide growth because if we do that, then millennials will stick with your company. But if we don't, we've seen millennials jump from job to job within 12 to 18 months because they don't feel that they can grow. It's not that they get bored, it's just that they really want to have a growth future. And if companies are not providing that, then unfortunately they go to find it at a different company. So hopefully these are beneficial for you. We could talk for another 3 hours about it. Both Sherry and I are extremely passionate about this, but I'm going to hand it over quick to Stephanie. I know she wants to talk quickly about something coming up with Saba. So Stephanie, back over to you.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Patrick and Sherry. We're all giving you a virtual round of applause for a great and very engaging presentation today. And before we get to the Q&A, I just want to invite everybody to join us next Wednesday to discover how you can drive employee engagement at your organization. We have a Saba product tour coming up Wednesday, August 17th. And if you want to sign up now, just type in the text chat, sign me up, and we will register you. Otherwise, we'll also be sending you a link with the recording and the slides from today's presentation. So feel free to just type in the question box, sign me up, and we'll get you registered for our session next week. So we do have a couple of questions that came in, Patrick, so maybe we can go through some of those now that we have some time.
Sure.
Okay, let's look. So when working with millennial developers who want to be more creative working or do more creative work utilizing their development skills, how do you engage them when the work offered is more repetitive and not as creative outlets?
Yeah, it's a good question because a lot of times, creativity, people tie creativity to engagement. And I don't think that's it. Some of you talk about developers or engineers, for example, like really, technical roles. Some of our most engaged team at Flightcar were the engineering and development team. And I think that allowing for the social engagement aspect, one of our engineers is the one who took the lead for developing the sports leagues and getting everybody rallied around that. So I think the other areas that you can do really, if you have a job that's highly technical or maybe not as creative, engaging them in different aspects, the social aspect in particular, works really well with engaging millennials in that area. So it's a good question.
Great. Thank you. And can you give an example of what daily advancement might look like?
Yeah. So something that is in our manager and development program that Sherry was talking about, something that we had this knowledge, skill, and ability kind of resource document that we referenced every day. We wanted our teammates and leaders to reference every day. And we split it up into quarters, and 2 to 3 months was a different phase of the program. So every day, our managers should be utilizing this KSA checklist and meeting with their millennial workforce and walking through and going to this resource document. So even something as small as showing a check mark in one area in a day is showing some sort of advancement, because I just feel like they're connected to what the larger strategy is, right? So they can see an entire quarter or entire phase laid out in front of them. So even just completing one thing in a day is an example of how to show advancement in a day. So that's an example.
Great, thank you. And this one's a little bit more of a tricky one, but how do you make training like sexual harassment bite-sized content or engaging?
Yeah. So that's a good one. And, obviously we have all of these regulatory training programs that we have to take, right, state and federal level. And I think that's not so much about creating bite-sized content, because the content is what it is. I think it's allowing the learner to do it in bite-sized phases, right? So the great thing about Saba is that it allows you to start a program and then you can do 10 minutes of it, let's say, and then stop it and go back to it. So bite-sized content doesn't mean that it's a program that just is only designed to be 10 minutes. Bite-sized content or micro-learning is also about allowing your teammates to just maybe spend 10 to 15 minutes on sexual harassment training today, right? And then go do some work and then come back to it and do another 10 to 15 minutes. So it's not so much always about content with micro-learning, it's about how much time or you are allowing an employee to take at a specific time. Like instead of saying you have to sit down and do 4 hours of sexual harassment training in one sitting.
And Patrick, if I can speak to that a little
Sure.
bit, I think that's also, you have to back it up and start it from the design of the content itself. So really try to bucket your content. And even though, yes, sexual harassment is one topic, but you're going to be able to divide that into subtopics. So really make those buckets a clear, defined, they can jump on and learn about, this aspect maybe from the view of the employee and then from the view of the employer. You can break it down so that those 10-minute modules really make sense as their own subtopic, so that they're not just pausing an hour-long module every 10 minutes, but they're actually learning about a little subtopic every time they jump on. And, like you said, Saba makes that really easy because you can jump on there and upload your subtopics and then just assign those subtopics all together as part of their sexual harassment curriculum, or make that all of a course together. So just really take your time into compartmentalizing that information and publishing it separately.
Perfect. Thank you both. And just a reminder for everybody as we wrap up right before our last question, if you'd like to join us next week, feel free to send a note in the text chat and say sign me up, and we'll do so. And our last question, I think we've talked a lot about what the organization can do to engage millennials, but the last question is, what about the responsibility of the millennial?
So I think there's a couple of different ways to read this question, but I think that the intent of this question, and for whoever asked the question, it's a very good question. I'll try to answer it in the way that I think you're asking it. So, the responsibility of the millennial is, I think that if the company is dedicating a lot of engagement and is, Sherry talked earlier about having a strong positive reaction to the company dedicating themselves to really not only engaging the millennial, but to really be actioning everything that the millennial provides as far as feedback goes. And so I think that the responsibility of the millennial kind of grows with feeling that the company is responsible to them, right? So if you commit to something as an organization, especially with the millennial work group, their responsibility level and it starts growing, right? And you start developing responsibility with millennials because they start feeling like, okay, so the company's doing a lot for me, and I'm going to be a responsible member of the corporate community, right? So I really think it starts with the company, though. If the company has to dedicate the time and the resource to developing the millennial, providing avenues of feedback, and dedicating engagement with the millennial, and then the responsibility kind of comes along with it. And the respect built. I think a respect really built for organizations with the millennial workforce. Because another thing to keep in mind is this may be a millennial's first job, right? And a lot of ours, it was their first job right out of college. And so you really have to help develop responsibility, corporate responsibility. But I think by providing respect and dedicating to the development of the millennial generation, that the respect and responsibility just automatically grows with the millennial. So it's a good question. So.
Great. Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Sherry. We're getting great feedback. Everybody really enjoyed today's presentation. So thanks for staying a little longer and answering some questions and for joining us today.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody out there. Sherry, thanks for all of your comments and feedback. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, and appreciate everybody's great questions and great feedback. Thank you.
And just one more quick thank you. Stephanie, thank you to you and to Saba for hosting these, for having us join. We love being a partner with you. It's like I said, Saba was a game changer for us. So just thank you for involving us in this.
Thank you so much. So we wish everybody a great day. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.